Lot really to discuss here, I should say. So I do want to bring in Elon Levy, a former Israeli government spokesperson, to discuss all of it. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us.
Good to be here, Josh.
All right, so first I do want to touch on the situation there with the talks between U.S. and Iran, all of it, of course, related to Iran's nuclear program. What are the possible implications for Israel there, and should Israel be involved in those discussions?
Israel wants to see a deal that will dismantle Iran's nuclear program. Iran cannot be allowed to enrich its own uranium. It now has enough enriched uranium for 6 nuclear bombs, and it is maybe a week or 2 weeks away from making it weapons grade. It is completely unacceptable that the Iranian regime will retain an ability to enrich weapons grade uranium. So Israel wants to see a deal that gets enrichment taken out of Iran entirely to block its pathway to getting a nuclear bomb, like the deal that dismantled Libya's nuclear reactor, Libya's nuclear systems. Israel does not want to return to the JCPOA, a bad deal under the Obama administration that the Trump administration has completely trashed, which didn't block Iran's path to a deal. That's why it's so important that we hear the mediator, Steve Witkoff, talking about a deal that will eliminate Iran's nuclear enrichment. And I hope the United States will be fully coordinated with Israel, which is, of course, the eyes and ears of the US here on the ground in the Middle East, drawing on the intelligence it has to make sure that any deal blocks Iran's path to a nuclear bomb and takes away its nuclear weapons capability.
We also know, as we're taking a live look here at the border, that talks do continue over a possible ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. This is, no question, been ongoing for a while. The Mossad chief will be in Doha for those talks. Egypt actually preparing a new proposal that would reportedly include a 5-year truce. Is that something that Israel would ever consider?
Yeah, there's a major difference between a 5-year truce and a permanent ceasefire, right? Israel understands that any deal that leaves the Hamas regime in power, that leaves in place the war machine that started the October 7th massacre, just starts the clock ticking towards the next war. If you don't want there to be another Gaza war, this has to be the last Gaza war, and it means that it has to end with the total defeat and surrender of Hamas. Otherwise, the next war is just a matter of time. What will happen if we sign an agreement for a 7-year truce? It means Hamas will start rebuilding its tunnels, rebuilding its rockets, retraining its troops, and preparing for the next October 7th massacre when it can invade Israel and burn families alive and rape Israelis at a music festival. But Israel does want a deal that will get those poor hostages out. We believe there are still 24 hostages who are alive in Gaza. 59 altogether. The rest have already been murdered. And we know that those hostages are being starved. They're shackled. They're being tortured. There is a hostage in there who still has shrapnel in his eye. And that is why it is urgent that all pressure is brought to bear on the Hamas regime to release those hostages now.
We heard from Ben-Gvir, and I mentioned this off the top here. He actually posted on social media that U.S. Republican lawmakers support his, quote, clear position on how to act in Gaza, and that the food and aid depots should be bombed. Can you explain your understanding of that suggestion? Is that a possibility, and do the people there in Israel agree with that?
No, I can't explain that. Bombing food supplies in an effort to starve the population into submission would be, by all accounts, a war crime. Israel has not done that, and Israel will not do that. Israel's policy now in not letting aid into the Gaza Strip is based on 2 things. 1, there is plenty of food in Gaza. During the ransom to get the hostages out, Israel let in more than 25,000 trucks of aid into Gaza, 450,000 tons of food. That's several months' supply, and Israel is monitoring the humanitarian situation in Gaza. There is plenty of food. If people aren't getting it, it's because the Hamas regime is hijacking it. And here's the second thing. International law requires Israel to facilitate supplies into Gaza, but not if Hamas is hijacking it. Israel is not obligated to let in supplies that Hamas is taxing in order to finance its war machine. Israel before let trucks into Gaza, and Hamas used that to finance the war machine and the army that it's using to fight against Israel. And so Israel is now saying we're not letting more supplies into Gaza because Hamas is using that in order to grow stronger. But no, I can't explain the minister's suggestion, and I see no prospect for that happening.
I do want to ask you about this other headline here. What do you make of the ICC appeals chamber declining to rule on Israel's request to suspend those arrest warrants that we've been discussing for months now for Netanyahu and Gallant?
This makes absolute sense. Israel has been saying for months the ICC arrest warrants are completely null and void because Israel isn't a member and Palestine isn't a state. Israel isn't a member of the ICC and Palestine is not a UN member and sovereign state. So there is no basis for jurisdiction of the ICC over Israeli leaders. And that's before we get into the merits of the case, which are complete nonsense. You can go sentence by sentence in the prosecutor's request for an arrest warrant based completely on lies trying to undermine Israel's ability to undermine the Hamas regime and bring back the hostages. So as far as Israel is concerned, if the ICC is now saying, we're not even sure whether we have jurisdiction, and they don't, those arrest warrants are obviously null and void, and the court should say so.
All right. Elon Levy, former Israeli government spokesperson. Anything you want to add here before I let you go? Anything we missed?
The hostages are suffering. There is no time to get them out. And we need pressure on Qatar. Qatar is Hamas's major state sponsor. Qatar condemned Israel for the October 7th massacre. While the massacre was going on, Qatar has admitted that it has been trying since day one to get Israel to pay a ransom that would leave Hamas in power to plot the next October 7th massacre. The mother of the leader of Qatar publicly mourned Yahya Sinwar, the arch-terrorist, when he was killed. Qatar, which pours billions of dollars into Al Jazeera in order to poison global public opinion and capture elite institutions in the United States, to sow radicalism and division within America and undermine its democracy. Qatar is not a neutral actor. It's not a friendly actor. It is Hamas's patron. It is telling Hamas to hold on to the hostages. And we need pressure on Qatar to force Hamas to release the hostages.